Welcome back to Under Pressure, your favorite business building podcast for the pressure washing community. Today, we are very excited to bring to you Jeff Engel, the COO of ICI Insurance. Jeff, it's a pleasure to have you on today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So Jeff and I met down in Orlando at the IWCA joint venture with PWNA for the conference they had down there. And I'm very excited to have Jeff on today to talk about insurance in this industry specifically. Jeff specializes in insurance for contractors, specifically pressure washers and window cleaners. And so, Jeff, could you tell us a little bit about how you came to specialize in this specific industry? Is there a story for you? How you got into this?
Well, yeah, my story really goes back to before insurance. Really, I was in manufacturing industry, and I was specialized in safety and risk management for a very large organization, and decided I want a career change, but loved helping people and helping people in industry solve problems. And so I knew lots of the regulations and the risk management practices that you would need to run a good business. So left that business, went into insurance, and immediately started writing contractors because I was able to speak their language and I could talk to them about OSHA and some of the different strategies they had. And then started. I wrote a window cleaning franchise that did some pressure washing as well, and started talking to them. And I told them the story about how when I was a kid, my parents had actually moved into a larger house, and they bought equipment. They bought a window cleaning, like commercial window cleaning equipment, so they could clean the windows. And my dad's like, "I'll pay you to do this." I was in 8th grade, and all my buddies were like mowing lawns, and I said, "Okay." So I did it, and he paid me. I was like, and the neighbors saw me doing it, and they said, "Hey, can you do that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I could do that for you." So I did it, and I made a good chunk of money on it. So then I had this racket in high school, and I actually have a business card from my
That's
days.
awesome.
That's back from like my home address from when I was in 8th grade. That's
Wow.
just does windows. So then when I started telling people about that, then they're like, "Oh man, not only does he get the risk management, he actually used to do this to, hustle and earn a living back when he was in high school." So, here I am today, and I've got that business card from when I was 14 on my desk. So,
That's a great story. I can't believe you actually have the business card still. That is
yeah,
amazing.
yeah,
So for
we found like 3 of them, and I told my wife, I'm like, "Do not get rid of that," and then she ended up getting me a frame for it. So.
So I'm very glad you told that story because it's important for everyone listening to understand that Jeff is a specialist in your industry. So today we are going to talk about the pitfalls of taking on the cheapest insurance that you can find,
Yeah.
the current environment. Why is this important? So I guess we can just get into the very basic first, and then we'll get into the specifics. But Jeff, what is the power of having the right insurance? What can that mean for business?
Well, the biggest thing is peace of mind. Most of the people on this podcast are business owners, and they're trying to go and get up and run a business every day, and they need to know that they've got somebody that has their back, that has the right coverage that they need. And if you're going out for, contractors a lot of times work on bids, and so that's kind of their mentality. So, that being their mentality, they think that's what I should do for insurance too. Well, if you go out and you tell people you're trying to get bids on insurance, and you go to multiple locations, what that does is they're automatically going to try and get you the least expensive coverage possible. And a lot of times, what we'll talk about is that least expensive coverage probably isn't going to have a lot of the things you need. What they should do is go to an independent agent, okay, like myself, that's got contracts with multiple carriers, and go to someone that specializes in what they have. Because then what I'm able to do, what our agency is able to do, is to essentially say, "Okay, here's the minimum coverage that you need that we will let you walk out the door with for your business," which is going to include some endorsements that you might not get elsewhere. But then we're going to be the ones that send it out to multiple carriers, and then we're going to have all these different quotes based on what state you're in and how much payroll you're going to have. And then we'll say, okay, based on everything you told us, here's the insurance you need with all the endorsements you need to protect you and your business.
So it sounds like you can't just go to a big box store and get a cookie cutter plan. You need to actually have the specific solution for your business.
Yeah, absolutely. For pressure washing, for example, most insurance companies, many of them at least, will not write insurance for a pressure washing operation. And there's several reasons for that. But then the ones that do, even if any of these major carriers that you see on TV every weekend watching a football game, they all like to advertise. So even if they do want to write a pressure washing business, you have to have somebody that's going to ask for the specific endorsements they need. The biggest one is known as care, custody, and control, and then there's another one that's just as important called voluntary property damage. And what people don't know is that if you just get a basic general liability policy and you're pressure washing something and say the nozzle itself comes off and shoots and damages the surface you're working on, that's going to be excluded on your policy unless you have care, custody, and control or voluntary property damage endorsed onto the policy. So really, really, really critical that you have those coverages in place, because otherwise, if you damage something you're cleaning or you've been hired to clean, no matter how it was that it got damaged, it's going to be excluded unless those endorsements are in place.
Interesting. So what is the current environment? So we had talked about some of the pitfalls of not going with the specific coverage for you. So what do you see, I guess, in the public sphere now going on that's either of concern to you or a cause of celebration? I'm curious, like, we know what can go wrong, or actually, can you share with us what could go wrong in that current environment?
So the current environment, anybody that's spent any time at home and watches the news can see that most of the ads, it seems like to me at least, especially during daytime news, if you ever go home and watch the 12 o'clock news or something like that, or watch a rerun of it, it's, at least in our market, it's primarily consumed with lawyers and attorneys advertising. And some of them have completely pulled away the kind of facade of what they're doing. And they even say, if you get in a wreck with a company vehicle, they don't even say if you get in a wreck or if you think you need an attorney. They actually literally say, if you get in a wreck with a company vehicle, you need to call us. So what I remind business owners of that all the time, because what they need to know is when they're driving around in a vehicle that has a business owner name on it, or name of a business, they're essentially a driving billboard for somebody that, whether or not the business is at fault, they think they have deep pockets. Everybody thinks business owners have deep pockets, and you and I both know that when business owners are starting out, there's sometimes no pockets, let alone deep pockets, right?
Yeah.
So it's really, really important that business owners know and understand that. And the one thing they can do to protect that is to at least get a good limit of liability coverage for their vehicles. Because what that's going to do is protect, a lawsuit for some, could be frivolous, could be, actually, allowable, but protect them from some sort of lawsuit that could go over their insurance and then go against them personally, and they could actually lose the business.
Wow. So,
but I will go on and say, there's some things that they can do nowadays to help mitigate the cost of insurance. There's several things that come to mind. I would say the biggest one is just be careful who you're hiring and who's driving. I recommend that when you're hiring, you run an MVR, a motor vehicle report of that employee before you hire them, because it needs to be somebody that you can trust to drive. Doing that up front will prevent the potential issues of, I've hired this person and then I run their motor vehicle report and realize they can't drive. That can be a huge issue. And I know it's really hard in this day and age to find labor and find people to work for you, but it is a big recommendation of us to take your time and at least do that last check. It might cost $20-$30 in your state, depending on where you are, but it's going to be worth it if you find out that they have a suspended license or they have DUIs recently or something else that you really can't get around. That's one. Another is GPS tracking devices. We're seeing more and more contractors, especially, put in GPS tracking devices in their vehicles, and they hear that and they may think, "Oh my God, that's going to be really expensive." It's really not. The technology has improved quite a bit, and if you sign a subscription to a professional service,
Mhm.
there's various fleet tracking technologies down to a fleet of one that you can get, and it might only cost you $30 a month to have a camera that's facing both forward, and if you want, you can get them that face also at the driver to ensure that your employees aren't like on their cell phone while they're driving and there's no distracted driving going on. And I'll tell you, that's the number one easiest way to defend yourself in the event of a liability related vehicle crash. And if I'm a business owner and my liability is at stake, but it's my employees that are doing the driving, I'm probably going to want to have something that's, quote unquote, my eyes and ears out on the road. And if you do things like that, you can usually get a discount on your auto insurance for it.
I'm curious now. Are there other steps you could take in the operation of your business to get insurance prices for other specific things to decrease? As someone who's starting a business that says, "Hey,
Yeah,
I need insurance, but
yeah,
I need to do it right, but I need the cost
right.
lower." What other measures could they take?
Right. So, no, great question. So, one would be, property insurance and mobile equipment insurance. Yes, it's necessary. Yes, you need it. But if you look at it and you think, okay, if I have a property claim or, my equipment gets stolen, yes, it's an issue. Like it might cost $3,000-$4,000, and that's expensive. But if I don't have liability coverage in place for the right things, and I damage, you could damage $100,000 piece of work and not have coverage for it, and that's a much bigger loss. So I always say, okay, make sure you've got your liability, make sure you've got your auto liability, make sure you've got your workers' compensation, and then go and buy your coverages for like inland marine, or also known as mobile equipment, property insurance for property at the shop, and then vehicle insurance. You can also raise deductibles on any of those once you do have those. But a big one, and one I like to tell people, is that your most important meeting of the year from an insurance standpoint is not actually with your agent. It's actually going to be with your auditor.
Hmm.
Okay. And if there's one meeting that can, one, make you pull your hair out, and two, make or break you, it's going to be your general liability and work comp audit at the end of the year. And the best way to prepare for those is to start before the year even starts. We talk to people quite a bit and tell them, okay, so here's the code you have for workers' compensation, here's the code you have for general liability. And we recommend that they actually get those codes kind of built into their payroll system, so that then as they go through the year, whenever they go, say they're going to do pressure washing on a building, and 20% of the hours on that building require them to be above ground in a lift or something like that. What we're doing is we're saying, okay, every time you do that job, it needs to be recorded in your system to where it shows you're doing 80% of those hours from the ground, which is one workers' comp code, and then the final 20% from above ground in a lift, or maybe from a high ladder, or maybe even from a rope in some circumstances, whatever that is. But those need to be documented in that other class code, because then they're going to be able to get a nice clean report that's going to have the class codes, which is
Hmm.
exactly what the auditor is looking for, and hand those to him at the end of the year. And so then the less questions an auditor has to ask, the less surprises are going to come your way. And with that, we do have some carriers that also let you do what we call pay as you go for workers' compensation. So, for instance, some states, depending on how far north they are, there may be certain months where their business is almost zero, and then the summer months are just, they're just slammed. And it makes it really hard to cut your normal monthly check for workers' compensation in January when you hardly have any income coming in. So
Mhm.
if you get a pay-as-you-go workers' compensation carrier, you can get it to where the months you're cutting the small check is the months you have the low income as well. And so that really helps a business owner out from a payroll, from a cash flow standpoint.
Absolutely. Thank you. So we need to take a minute to hear a word from our sponsor. We'll be right back.
You certainly can't afford to give profit away for no reason. But what if I told you credit card processors may be overcharging you and robbing you of profits you've worked hard to earn? It's time to put an end to being overcharged for payment processing. It's time to take back your profits. That's why we've put together a free report, How to Avoid Being Overcharged by Your Payment Processor. Head over to takebackyourprofits.com, download the report, and put an end to being overcharged for credit card processing. You've worked hard for your sales, and you deserve to keep it. What are you waiting for? Go to takebackyourprofits.com and download your report today.
Welcome back to Under Pressure. Thank you for joining us. As I had said before, we have Jeff Engel, the COO of ICI Insurance. We're very happy to have him here today. He is an expert in insurance for this industry, and so we are going to get his insight, advice, and information, as much of it as we can, to you, our audience. So my first question as we come back to you, Jeff, is can you use insurance as a sales tool? If someone is getting bids for a project and, they're worried about the money, right? So from the consumer end, if they're worried about, what's this quote, period, just the money side, is insurance something you can use to tell someone, hey, come with us use us because we have insurance, because we have the right insurance? Is it something that can be used as a sales tool?
Absolutely. There's lots and lots of fly-by-night contractors, and it doesn't matter if you're talking power washing or window cleaning or concrete or any other type of home services. There are lots and lots of fly-by-night contractors, and there's something to be said to say, I am a reputable business. We're established. We have all these proper controls in place, but one of the biggest ones is insurance. And never be ashamed if somebody says, "Oh, well, my price is a little too high." Well, yeah, they say my price is too high. Well, tell them it's high partly because we have the right insurance in place. In some places, they might not have insurance at all. That's a huge deal because what people need to know is, as a business owner, you want peace of mind about your business. But if you think about it, the homeowner wants peace of mind about their home at the same time, right? And so they want to know that if you go and you accidentally screw something up, that you've got the right coverage in place to get it fixed. I mean, that's all there is to it. And so, leverage that peace of mind that you're using or that you're getting from purchasing insurance to talk to that homeowner about the same peace of mind. And you can have an example certificate that says, here's a copy of the certificate of insurance that we have, and if you request one that has your information on it, we'll get it to you. That's one of the other things we do when we write general liability insurance. There's various ways you can do it, and the way we do it is we typically include various contractual language requirements that you might see if you're going to go and clean for a small business or something like that, and you might hear fancy terms like additional insured or waivers of subrogation. Those type of terms are ones that if you're going to clean for like a small business or a franchise chain or something like that they might require you to have. And, don't be afraid to show a homeowner that like we have all these different things that you would need. And, if you want a certificate showing you as a certificate holder, we can do it. Just don't ever be afraid to go and say, no, we're insured properly. We have what we need. Here's why. We can give you peace of mind knowing that if we're going to work on your home and if some, God forbid something happens, you're going to be okay.
Absolutely. So, Jeff, let's go back to your story of how you got involved in this specific industry. And I know it's pressure washing and window cleaning that you're
Right.
that you're providing insurance to. So if we have I'm Jake, obviously Jake Aronson. If we have a little Jake Aronson that gets his first pressure washer and wants to run out there and start a pressure washing company, but right now it's a hobby, but I have a big vision. What's my timeline? What should my timeline look like? I'm not a little kid thinking this far ahead, but for someone who's starting out a pressure washing business, where do all these pieces fit in? Is this something you have to get all at once? Is this something that you push back until you're a certain size? Or is this something that you get, one piece of coverage after the other after you hit certain milestones? So I'm
Yeah.
curious, what should that timeline look like for a business owner from, in the inception of the business to growth?
Right. Great question. So, really, it's going to be kind of an in-between answer. I mean, I'm going to tell you that every single contractor needs to get general liability insurance, and because it is so inexpensive to include it in, I'm going to recommend they all get the general liability insurance that includes the mobile equipment and the voluntary property damage already included. So
Mm-hmm.
typically that's going to be able to be written on one policy. And that one policy would have, you would get all those endorsements for your mobile equipment, your liability for $1 million in coverage, and then your voluntary property damage all in one. Um, after that, so the minute you think you're going to potentially hire an employee, you need to make sure you've got workers' compensation in place. And I encourage them to do it sooner rather than later.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I encourage that is that with workers' compensation, similar to general liability, you're going to get audited every year. And so if you go and say, okay, well, I'm going to get ready to start hiring an employee, and I think maybe the payroll of this employee is going to be $30,000 a year. You want to get the coverage and everything set up and ready to go for them. And if at the end of the year you don't pay all those $30,000, that's okay. You can get some money back on your workers' compensation. Okay, so it's not 100% lost money, and you can usually get a sizable amount back. The other thing I'll tell you is that the auto is sometimes, and depending on the circumstances, you may or may not get the auto insurance before you even get the workers' compensation. What I tell people is if they're going to have a vehicle that's driving around, like I call them, a roaming billboard essentially, that has any sort of contact information for their business,
Yeah.
they need to start talking about getting a business policy that includes the insurance for the auto. And they need to talk to their agent and make sure it's properly listed and everything like that. Just because if you have all these hopes and dreams of growing, the things that can throw it out the fastest is some sort of uncovered claim from a standpoint of property damage or auto liability or an employee getting injured. Those are the type of things that can just wipe out a whole business. They're not, the equipment or coverage for something in a shop. If you rent out a location or something like that, that's kind of secondary because, you can go back and replace that stuff. It's just property. But when you get into the type of claims that could be a lawsuit, that's what you got to start worrying about. So, first and foremost, your general liability, your voluntary property damage, and usually just because we're talking dirt cheap, adding on the mobile equipment to it because it's all kind of bundled into one.
Mm-hmm.
Auto insurance, as soon as you've got something that is a driving billboard, you need to get some form of coverage for liability of at least $1 million on your auto. And then as soon as you start thinking about hiring an employee, you need to add the workers' compensation. The other thing is that then, years later, you start getting bigger and you're going to realize, oh, I've got insurance that renews at 3 to 4 times a year, and I have to constantly get new certificates and talk to my agent 3 to 4 times. Pick one of the dates, the renewal dates that say two months out, and tell your agent, hey, I want to have everything start renewing on this date. They can do that. A lot of times we'll tell them the best one is to renew on your workers' compensation date, but really, if they just pick one of their current renewal dates, we can usually make everything coincide with their main date. It makes things a lot easier for them because then they can just look at all their insurance one time a year and do a real good thorough review with their agent, and then move on from that.
That sounds very convenient. Like that could save a lot of time.
Yeah, Absolutely. It's a lot of time, a lot of headache. And then the big thing is that if you have a work comp audit, you usually have a general liability audit. And if they line up, then you're only preparing for an audit one time.
Wow. So do you have any other little golden nuggets like that people might not be so aware of that could save them a little bit of a headache?
The big thing in this type of insurance is to look at your payrolls, and look at your payrolls that are listed. There's, by state, there's different variations on how payroll of an owner needs to be classified for both general liability and workers' compensation. But if you're looking at pricing and you're looking at some other competitors' pricing and theirs is really, really low compared to somebody else, there's a good chance it could be because the payrolls are different. So what I recommend is that people look at the rate that you're paying for each dollar of payroll instead of just looking at the total premium itself, because otherwise it's really hard to compare because you're looking at apples and oranges. So really want to point that out, make sure people know that, and then always in your business ask if it includes voluntary property damage and care, custody, and control. That is like
biggest
priority
mistake.
number one.
Yep. All right. So I guess before we wrap up, I have one more question for you. And we probably already covered it, but what is the biggest mistake someone could avoid doing as they are looking into insurance for their business?
Yeah, I would say just not paying attention to it and not asking the right questions of their agent, and making sure that they at least stop, pay attention, ask the right questions, and don't just look at the bottom line. It's really, really, really hard to just look at that bottom number and say, oh, I don't need that add-on, or I don't need that add-on. We're going to show you what coverages are actually optional that we consider optional for your business, but there's some that, other agents might say are optional, but I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to let anybody write a pressure washing policy for a pressure washer that doesn't include certain things that other agents may say are optional and try and pull them out to cut the cost. Because otherwise, if I did that later on, you'd be really, really mad at me. So, just don't just look at that bottom line. I would say really, really evaluate and talk to your agent, make sure they know what they're doing and that they've got those proper coverages.
All right, Jeff. So if someone's listening to this podcast and they're thinking, wow, I really need to stop neglecting insurance, and this is something I really need to think about, what are some of the resources you'd send them to? Is that you? Should I have them reach out to you? Should I have them look at a website? Are there any good books about this? Where would you recommend that people look for resources on insurance?
Well, the best one I could say probably is just to reach out to us. We've got a special email address set up just for this. It's called pressurewashers@ici.insurance. You send an email to that. Just tell us a little bit about what you're looking for or what issue you're having, and we can reach out, whether it's to answer a question about insurance or give you advice on risk management. Any of those types of things, we can go ahead and do that for you from that email. You can also just go to our website, www.ici.insurance.
All right. So thank you very much. I recommend to our audience, reach out to Jeff. Jeff knows what he's talking about, and I'm sure he can point you in the right direction for the information you need when it comes to insurance in this space.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you for joining us. This has been a fantastic episode. I'm sure it will shine a lot of light onto the current environment of insurance in the industry for our audience, and it really helped them grasp the concept and understand where they need to be with it. So again, thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you to our audience, and please keep engaging on Instagram. If there's anything specifically you want to hear on this show, if it's more insurance people like Jeff, if you have any questions for Jeff and I need to bring Jeff back on, if it has to do with any aspect of the business, please let me know. We'd love to have more facets of the business side of pressure washing on this podcast. So thank you very much. Engage on the Facebook. It's under under_pressure_PW_podcast on Instagram. Under Pressure PW podcast on Instagram. We really appreciate all of the followers. We have some great stuff coming, and I'm really excited to share all of this great information and these guests with you. We're building a great community here. It's a fantastic community, and we're very excited to be joining it and meeting people like Jeff. So thank you very much, and keep tuning in for our fantastic lineup of guests that will be coming to you.
Thanks for listening. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit the bell so you won't miss our next episode. This episode was produced by Jake Aronson. This has been a Pair Payments production.